Wow, the studio smells absolutely fantastic today. There's just nothing quite like that rich, smoky aroma of aged oak right as you pour a fresh glass.
Oh, absolutely. Cheers to you. It's a perfect pour to anchor what is, honestly, going to be a very wild ride today.
Cheers. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you happen to be tuning in from across the globe. Welcome back to Sip and Talk, and a massive hello to all our Sip and Talkers out there.
Yes, welcome everybody.
Today, we are actually tearing up the usual script. I want to start by addressing a brilliantly honest email we received from a longtime listener.
Oh, I love the honest ones. They always keep us sharp. What's the question?
So the email says, I love the show, but I have a burning question. Why does Sip and Talk always focus on the geopolitical triangle of the U.S., China, and Taiwan? There are nearly 200 countries in the world. Is everywhere else just perfectly fine and boring?
Yeah, I mean, that is a completely fair critique, right? If you just scrolled through our recent topics, you might genuinely think we're, sponsored by a think tank obsessed with the Pacific.
Right. Or that we just ignore the rest of the map entirely. I read that and immediately wondered, do we suffer from a bit of geopolitical OCD?
Well, let's clarify the objective reality for a second. It really isn't favoritism. That specific trio is the core storm eye of global geopolitics.
Totally. Because a potential conflict in that region threatens what? An estimated $10 trillion evaporation of the global GDP?
Exactly, 10 trillion, which is roughly 10% of the entire global economic output.
Wait, let me stop you there. Because we throw these massive numbers around all the time, but what does that actually look like?
Well, to put it in historical context, that level of financial destruction would be worse than the 2008 financial crisis and the global pandemic combined.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so when we talk about this region, we aren't talking about distant political posturing. We're talking about, the inflation in your hometown, whether your company can make payroll, and the cost of literally everything you buy.
Right, and it's not just about military posturing or trade tariffs. It's an entire technological food chain. You have the U.S. setting the rules, you have China actively challenging those rules, and then Taiwan is just sitting there holding the ultimate trump card.
Exactly. And that trump card is actually highly misunderstood. Everyone is obsessed with the artificial intelligence revolution right now. But without Taiwan, the AI boom physically cannot happen.
Because it comes down to that specific advanced packaging technology, right? CoWoS?
Yep, CoWoS, chip on wafer on substrate.
Wait, break that down for me. Is that just like a fancy term for putting a chip in a plastic box?
Not at all. Think of it as 3D architectural engineering for microscopic electronics. Instead of placing chips flat next to each other, this tech allows them to be stacked vertically and connected incredibly closely.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so that drastically reduces the distance data has to travel, which lowers power consumption and massively speeds up computation. Without that specific physical packaging mechanism, Silicon Valley's brilliant AI software designs are just blueprints. They literally cannot be manufactured.
So if that region sneezes, the entire global market catches a fever. The focus makes total sense. But our listener's email really stuck with me.
How so?
Because the underlying assumption that the rest of the world is just fine and boring is wonderfully incorrect. If you step outside that geopolitical storm eye, the world is profoundly absurd.
Oh, completely. Bureaucracy is a universal human condition, and it produces some spectacular failures.
Which brings us to today's pivot. We're taking a break from the major geopolitical theater to host the first annual Global Absurdity News Awards.
I love this so much.
We actually looked at our listener demographics and pulled the top 6 highly developed nations where you all tune in from. So we've got Japan, Germany, Australia, Spain, Canada, and the UK. We are going to explore the illogical, totally bureaucratic moments happening right now in these advanced societies.
And just to establish our mission statement here, this is an impartial, data-backed analysis.
Yeah.
We are pulling facts straight from reputable international news agencies.
That's exact.
The goal here is to break out of our information cocoons. It is incredibly easy to look at developed nations and assume they operate like perfectly oiled machines. We're going to examine the mechanics of why they actually don't.
Perfectly oiled machines. Well, let's start with Japan. When you think of Japan, you picture bullet trains, precision engineering, and robotics. So what is the mechanism behind this digital to fax machine pipeline I've been hearing about?
It's a fascinating clash between modern technology and cultural tradition. Japan has been pushing this massive top-down initiative to digitize their government.
Right.
But culturally, Japanese corporate and bureaucratic systems rely heavily on absolute consensus. And that consensus is traditionally proven by a physical stamp called a hanko applied to a physical piece of paper.
Okay, so a purely digital cloud system basically removes the physical proof of that consensus.
Precisely. The older generation of civil servants who hold the power need that physical verification to feel secure in the decision-making process.
So what do?
They created this bizarre hybrid. Citizens fill out modern online forms, but the moment it hits the government server, civil servants literally print it out, physically stamp it with their hanko to prove consensus, and then physically fax it to the next department.
You're kidding. They put it out just to fax it.
Yep. Paper and fax machine sales have actually seen regional spikes because of this so-called digitalization.
That is wild. It's like buying a state-of-the-art, custom-built Ferrari, but choosing to tow it down the highway with a horse because you just really prefer the feeling of holding the reins.
That visual is hilarious, but I mean, it connects directly to their broader macro-political paradoxes. This desire to hold on to the old while desperate for the new is fracturing their economy.
Because they have an aging population, right?
All right.
So they're desperate for tourism revenue and foreign labor.
Exactly. But simultaneously, there is domestic panic over too many foreigners disrupting their cultural homogeneity.
And everyday citizens are feeling the economic squeeze. I read that domestic rice prices have doubled recently.
They have. And while citizens panic over groceries, the political elite are playing a completely different game. You have conservative figures like Sana Takaichi pushing incredibly hawkish, aggressive diplomacy that spikes international tensions.
Meanwhile, the ruling LDP party is engulfed in these massive slush fund scandals.
Right.
Clarify the slush fund scandal for the listeners. What are we actually talking about here?
Essentially, political factions within the ruling party were secretly kicking back excess political donation funds to their lawmakers without legally reporting the money. It bypassed transparency laws completely.
So you have a facade of high-tech international stability covering up deep analog structural chaos.
Exactly. A digital facade hiding a corrupt fax machine.
Man, well, it's one thing when cultural traditions slow down digitalization. But what happens when a country whose entire identity is built on mechanical engineering simply stops working? Let's talk about Germany, the land of order.
Oh, the stereotype of German efficiency is currently undergoing a brutal reality check. Let's look at the Deutsche Bahn, the national railway. The latest data shows their long-distance trains are hitting a punctuality rate of under 60%.
Under 60%. I mean, if I showed up to work on time less than 60% of the time, I would be fired immediately. How does a culture obsessed with precision justify that level of systemic failure?
Well, the failure is rooted in a political mechanism. For decades, Germany pursued an economic policy known as the Black Zero. It was a strict obsession with a perfectly balanced federal budget, meaning they essentially refused to take on debt.
Okay, so they didn't borrow money.
Right, but the result? They chronically underinvested in their own infrastructure for years. The trains aren't late because Germans forgot how to build trains. They are late because the tracks, signals, and switches are ancient and failing.
But wait, surely that's just an underfunded railway issue, right? You can't condemn the entire German engineering ethos just because the trains are running a bit behind schedule.
It isn't just the trains. Look at the BER airport in Berlin. It was delayed for over a decade and came in massively over budget. The underlying cause was intense bureaucratic compartmentalization.
What do you mean?
The department designing the fire safety software literally wasn't communicating with the department designing the automated luggage system architecture. So when they finally turned it on, the systems crashed.
Oh my gosh.
Recently, it broke down so catastrophically that they had to hire massive chains of human workers to physically pass suitcases from hand to hand just to load the airplanes.
You were telling me the pinnacle of German engineering in the 21st century was a human bucket brigade for suitcases.
That is the reality. And when you understand that structural decay, you understand why German politics are currently a powder keg. Mainstream political parties have spent years building a firewall, basically refusing to govern with the far-right AfD party to protect democratic norms.
Right. But the everyday public is riding trains that are always late, dealing with broken infrastructure, and facing a stagnant economy. There's a huge debate there right now about restricting lifestyle part-time work, because the state desperately needs more labor hours.
Exactly. When the political elites say, trust us, we are protecting the system, but the system requires you to hand carry luggage onto an airplane, public frustration boils over.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that disconnect between the political rhetoric and the everyday infrastructural reality is exactly why populist support for the AfD is pushing higher. The mechanical failures are directly fueling the political instability.
It is entirely connected. Well, it's one thing when man-made infrastructure like railways break down, but the hypocrisy reaches a whole new level when these rigid bureaucracies try to manage nature. Let's fly down under to Australia.
Australia is fascinating because their wildlife is notoriously intense, but the absurdity isn't happening in the wild outback, it's happening in the suburbs.
Oh, no. What's happening?
During mating season, local Australian magpies become hyper-aggressive and swoop down to attack pedestrians and cyclists.
I have seen the videos. It is terrifying. They lock onto your head and just dive bomb you. So what is the highly developed governmental solution to this problem?
The official advice from several local governments is for citizens to attach zip ties to their bicycle helmets so they stick straight up like long antennas.
Wait, really?
Yes, and to tape fake, googly eyes to the back of their heads to confuse the birds.
Are you kidding me? Australians survive giant venomous spiders, but to walk down the street for a flat white, the government tells them they have to look like an alien radio receiver.
It perfectly illustrates how governments often shift the burden of complex problems onto the citizen, asking them to look ridiculous rather than actually addressing the environment. And this behavioral mechanism mirrors exactly how they are handling their severe housing crisis.
Housing prices in Sydney and Melbourne are completely detached from reality right now. How are they handling that? More zip ties?
Metaphorically, yes. The ruling Labour government is facing massive backlash over housing affordability. A huge part of this is driven by a tax mechanism called negative gearing.
Stop for a second. What actually is negative gearing? Is that just a fancy financial term for a tax write-off?
Essentially, yeah. It's a tax rule that allows property investors to deduct losses from their rental properties against their personal income tax.
Oh, I see.
It strongly incentivizes multiple property investment, which artificially drives up demand and locks out first-time homebuyers. It is a complex structural economic issue.
But instead of tackling the difficult tax reform, what are they doing?
The political opposition has floated this bizarre proposal to restrict housing to one house per immigrant.
Wow. So instead of fixing the broken tax loopholes or zoning laws that actually cause the shortage, they just point at the nearest immigrant and say, hey, it's their fault.
That is the exact mechanism of political burden shifting. Blaming immigrants for a complex tax issue is the political equivalent of taping fake eyes to the back of your helmet.
Right. It doesn't solve anything.
Exactly. It doesn't actually solve the structural problem of the swooping bird or the housing shortage. It just redirects the anxiety onto an easy, highly visible target.
Speaking of nature fighting back and humans completely dropping the ball, let's look at a completely different kind of environmental drama unfolding in southern Europe. Take us to Spain.
Down in Spain, at the Torrevieja salt lake, extreme heat combined with agricultural runoff caused a massive algae bloom. The environmental balance completely collapsed, and the entire lake turned a shocking, vibrant, bright pink.
I mean, aesthetically, that sounds beautiful, highly Instagrammable.
And that aesthetic was exactly the problem. Influencer culture prioritizes visuals over ecology. So instead of heeding warnings about the toxic ecological imbalance, influencers flocked to the lake.
Oh, no.
Some were wading into it, and a few actually tried to drink the bright pink algae water for views.
Oh, they drank it?
Yeah. The local police literally had to play a game of cat and mouse to chase these content creators out of a toxic swamp.
Drinking pink algae water for likes. You cannot script this level of madness.
Mm-hmm. It is madness. But contrast this environmental circus with Spain's current political circus. Pedro Sanchez's government originally campaigned heavily on a clean, anti-corruption, progressive platform. They presented themselves as the moral cleanup crew.
But how clean is the crew right now?
Not very. They are currently surrounded by corruption probes. There is an ongoing investigation involving the Prime Minister's wife and her business ties, and a massive scandal regarding a 53 million euro airline bailout tied to former Prime Minister Zapatero.
So the people who promised to purify the system are currently swimming in their own swamp. It makes me wonder, has modern politics just become pure values marketing? Like, a government will say all the right, progressive, morally pure things on the international stage, but completely ignore the massive corrupt mess happening right in their own backyard.
Values marketing. That is a brilliant way to frame it. The rhetoric becomes entirely disconnected from the operational reality. And if we want to talk about countries that project a pristine moral image globally while their domestic reality buckles under the weight of value marketing, we have to look at North America. Let's talk about Canada.
Oh, Canada. The friendliest, most polite neighbor on Earth. What is going wrong up north?
Let's examine the 2026 World Cup. Canada is co-hosting, and the budget has absolutely exploded to 1.1 billion Canadian dollars.
Okay, I have to push back a little. Hosting global mega events is always a financial black hole. That's a known risk.
True, but look at the specific mechanism of the overspend. They poorly negotiated infrastructure requirements. When you break down the math based on the number of matches Canada is actually hosting, it is costing Canadian taxpayers roughly $82 million per single match.
$82 million for 90 minutes of soccer.
Yes. To put that in local terms, $82 million is roughly the equivalent of a top-tier NHL team's entire annual salary cap, blown on one soccer game.
That is staggering. It's exactly like having that overly polite neighbor who maxes out all their credit cards to throw this incredibly lavish block party just so everyone on the street thinks they are doing great. But meanwhile, they can't afford to fix their own leaky roof.
That is precisely how the Canadian public feels right now. There is a massive public backlash over the financial mismanagement. People are so furious that there are active threats to boycott the 2026 national census in protest.
Wow.
And here is where the values marketing comes in. You have prominent political figures like Mark Carney taking these very strong moral stances on international conflicts, projecting Canadian virtue globally. But internally, the country is in a full-blown panic.
Right, because they have a severe housing affordability crisis, and the government is constantly reacting defensively to external pressures, like Trump's tariffs and his jokes about Canada becoming the 51st state.
Exactly. The effort spent projecting strength and morality internationally is entirely at odds with the anxiety and economic strain felt domestically.
If lecturing the world while you can't afford your own rent is one form of losing control, the ultimate loss of control has to be blaming the solar system for your failing infrastructure. Let's cross the pond and conclude our Absurdity tour in the UK.
Oh, the UK recently provided us with what might be the greatest bureaucratic excuse in modern history. The national rail system experienced severe delays, commuters were stranded, and the system gridlocked.
Oh, boy.
The official reason provided by the railway for why the trains couldn't run.
Please tell me it wasn't the classic leaves on the track excuse again.
No, the official reason was the wrong type of sunlight.
I'm sorry, what? The wrong type of sunlight? Are the trains operated by vampires? How did the sun break a train?
Well, the mechanical explanation was that the specific angle and intensity of the sun was creating a glare on aging optical sensors, making it impossible for the drivers to read the signals safely.
So, in a country famous for its perpetual gray skies and rain, the sun finally comes out and it paralyzes the transportation infrastructure. You almost have to respect the creativity of the PR department.
It is wildly creative. But the wrong type of sunlight is the absolute perfect metaphor for the UK's post-Brexit reality. The entire political promise of Brexit was to take back control, to cut the red tape, streamline the government, and be a sovereign powerhouse.
Right. And how is that control working out for them?
They have lost so much control that prime ministers now rotate faster than Premier League football coaches. The current Labour government came in promising strict stability and competence, but almost immediately, they stumbled into a disastrous early budget leak.
And the freebies scandal, that was huge.
Exactly. You have a mechanism where top politicians were accepting thousands of pounds in designer clothes and luxury concert tickets, so-called freebies, at the exact same time they were cutting winter fuel payments for the elderly.
So they promised to take back control, but they can't control their budget leaks, they can't control their politicians taking luxury gifts, and they definitely can't control the angle of the sun, all of which explains the rapid rise of the populist Reform UK Party.
Precisely. The illusion of governmental control is completely shattering against the reality of complex, everyday governance.
Wow. Okay, I have to say, as we wrap this up, I feel a profound sense of relief. It is genuinely therapeutic to see that Illogical bureaucracy, political theater, and terrible excuses are a universal human experience. It doesn't matter what your borders are or what your culture is. We are all dealing with the exact same nonsense.
It is a great equalizer, and I want to make it abundantly clear, pointing out these structural flaws is absolutely not an attack on the people of Japan, Germany, Australia, Spain, Canada, or the UK. We deeply appreciate all our international listeners. This is an objective analysis of how bureaucratic mechanisms fail.
Absolutely. We love you all. But the value of this exercise goes right to the core of what Sip and Talk is about, stepping outside our information cocoons. When you recognize these logical fallacies, when you understand why a government blames immigrants for a complex tax loophole, or why an airport luggage system crashes because of siloed departments, it prevents you from being manipulated.
That is the key. You stop falling for the political theater. A little sarcastic humor and a clear understanding of the mechanisms really is the best antidote to global anxiety. When you can laugh at the absurdity, you take away its power to induce fear.
Well said. So, what is the final thought we are leaving the Sip and Talkers with today?
I want everyone to ponder this. If every major government is increasingly relying on this values marketing to distract from their own domestic bureaucratic failures, what happens when a genuine global crisis hits that requires actual competent governance instead of just good public relations?
Oh, that is a chilling thought. A crisis you can't just fax away or blame on the sunlight. Well, on that note, remember that logic is your ultimate passport in this crazy world. If you enjoyed this journey through global absurdity, please make sure you subscribe to the Sip and Talk podcast so you never miss a conversation.
And while you're online, go support our old friend Mickey. Check out his YouTube channel, Mickey to Life. He is currently on a European travel vlog, and you have to see where he has ended up right now. The visuals are gorgeous, and hopefully his trains are running on time.
Absolutely. Go subscribe to Mickey to Life. Well, my whiskey glass is officially empty, which means it is time to go. Thank you for listening, everyone. As you head out into the world today, please watch out for the angle of the sun. And for the love of God, remember to tape some antennas to your head so the birds don't get you. Goodbye. Until next time.
Stay safe and stay logical. See you next time.